Hello, everyone. We are live streaming here with Nessa Maguire. We are streaming
Hey,
in different.
Joan.
Hello, how are you doing, Nessa?
Good. How are you?
I'm excited about this conversation. Let's see where this conversation drives us. I think it's going to be really interesting because we were already discussing and we were like, we had some like, common points about entrepreneurship, some disagreements, but also really interesting views, right? So that's what one part of the conversation. This is the second podcast, the second episode of the butterfly effect. Let's see, please, if there is people in the chat, let us know how the connection is. Last time we had some problems, but I think now it's all right. Let's hope.
Yes, I can hear you anyway.
All right, me too. So that's a good start. So, Nessa, how are you doing?
I am great. I am in sunny Lisbon. It's a lovely
Mhm.
day, and I just had a nice coffee, so life is good. How about you?
I just finished my coffee, so I am even more excited. And I am sitting in Gandia, my hometown. So warm here. I went to the beach this morning a little bit. That's why I'm a little bit red, as I was telling you before this. And yeah, I think the sun gave me good energy. So I would like to start this conversation with you introducing yourself, so the audience can let you know a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so my name is Nessa. I'm the founder and CEO of U.org. It's an Irish headquartered startup, basically a tech software. And what we do is we are developing what we call the infrastructure or the CRM for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, we started the company now about just under 2 years ago. We are currently live with customers using the product and then at research stage and development stage for some new products and features. In a previous life, I worked as a therapist, a coaching psychologist, and yeah, I suppose my kind of interest area was always around diverse experiences and how that's so important in the world, number one, and number two, how can that be facilitated in a way that everyone is given, a fair opportunity to participate, whether it be in education or in the workplace or in communities. So that's kind of, I suppose, what drives my interest and my action.
Nice. And I would like to start from the beginning. Ask you about your coaching and therapist career. Uh, so, as far as I know, you are working with children, right? It has been like that since the beginning, or it has changed?
So a mix. I did work with. I guess I've had, I would say, an interesting career. I did work with children, and I would say families more than children, because working with the parents was like a big component of what I did. Because there's no point engaging and working with, for example, a child to feel, more regulated if the parents aren't involved or the teachers aren't involved or sometimes if the siblings aren't involved. So yeah, I did that for quite a good portion of my career, but then I also did some other things. In Australia, I worked in hospitals and mental health facilities. I also worked in New Zealand for the government as an analyst on the first adventure activity legislation in the world, doing a lot of data analysis and boring stat stuff that I enjoy. And then I suppose the last few years before I started U.org, I'd moved away from working with children and I was working a lot more with the workplace, corporate, things like that.
And coming back to the families, during my master, I had a subject in the program which was called Family Business for Family Entrepreneurship, which was about, family business are really, really important in the world. The most of them are family owned. Uh, have you touched this field or only families in general?
So sorry, could you repeat the question?
Have you worked in this field or only families, not family business?
No, like that's a really interesting question because I spent about was like 7 years of my career working in Vietnam, which is a strong culture of family entrepreneurship and just entrepreneurship in general. So I definitely saw that with some families that I worked with more there than in other countries. But no, like to be honest, a lot of what I was focused on was making sure the children could access education,
Mhm.
or develop friendships or feel confident to go to a cafe. It was much more around accessing education and life skills.
I see. Uh, I think family is crucial when it comes to business and entrepreneurship. It was so fun this subject because we had to perform as a family businesses because the drama can get you a better understanding of what do they feel, and the advisors, we also had to do the role of advisors or consultants for them. And it was nice, this conversation, because the advisor was like a facilitator, and it was so much about feelings and emotions, because at the end the roles of the family are different than the roles in the business. You have to match them, the power structures. Really, really interesting. That's why I asked. And
It's
about
not something I would personally probably choose, to be honest. Like, I love my family, but I do think it's interesting how you import family dynamics then into like an organizational context. That
That's
would
a really
be,
popular. That's a really popular opinion. I
yeah.
disagree a little bit. You know why? Because sometimes it's just convenient. You know,
You
I mean,
trust your
it's like
family?
I will do a dangerous comparison with you here. For,
Okay.
for me, having a business with family is like having a diverse workers in your company. Why? Because it's more difficult to manage, but the reward could be even greater. See,
Yeah, interesting.
if you are able to manage your family roles in your business, and you have a family business because it has happened like that, and it's convenient just to keep doing it, and you are happy doing that. If you are able to manage that situation, the reward could be even greatest, right?
Yeah, like I don't know. I think I'm really interested in. I know we'll probably touch on this later. The element of entrepreneurship, which is the like the mental strength and the resilience required in it, and I do think it could be beneficial to have your family there and you trust them. Building trust with like co-founders and things like that is also a big risk, and I think the biggest cause of businesses failing or startups failing is falling outs between founders. But I do think it would make it very hard to switch off, because I'll give you an
Yeah.
example that's not really related, but I have friends that like them and their partner work in the same company or they work in the same profession, and it's really hard to set boundaries around not talking about work then when you go home. So I think that would be something that you would have to really actively manage.
Yeah, I mean, it's very likely that you have problems and discussions, and you are like, I mean, you need to be disciplined to be able to manage the situation and be able to have a structure. And when you go home, you need to have certain rules, and that was something that we learned during this course, right? Just switch off, and that's the difficult part. So yeah, I agree. I mean, like all the moms say, that the right balance, right, is the good. So yeah, really, really interesting. And talking specifically about children, you are still working as a therapist for children, right?
No, not anymore.
Not anymore. But I'm interested because children, I think they are somehow naturally entrepreneurs. They have light. They you can learn a lot from them, and especially you, if you are a therapist. I would like to know, what have you learned from them? It's like important key points that you can maybe mention.
Sure, that's a really good question. I agree with you. And like interestingly, side note, but important, I think important to state, because there tends to be a lot of focus on the negative sides of neurodiversity. So when I say neurodiversity, I mean people that have diversity in their brain. So that can be things like ADHD. I'm going to take this one specifically because interesting research shows that entrepreneurial populations have like more. Oh, sorry, let me start the sentence again. People with ADHD are more likely to be entrepreneurs than people who don't have ADHD. So it's a population or a group of people that are more entrepreneurial, and there's lots of data to back that up. So interesting that I guess I worked with a lot of kids from that population. So you're seeing that early entrepreneurial spirit. But I think one thing I learned from kids or working with kids is to tap into my creativity. And I think I still utilize that today, like making sure that I'm not getting stuck in a rut with my thinking, that I take a creative approach to things like problem solving. I think another one, which I try and bring into my personal and professional life, is the joy of play. I think when people turn to adults, we get kind of stuck in our ways and we forget to play. And play doesn't mean going to the gym. Play means unstructured fun. So like, okay, of course you could go to the gym too, but you get my point. So I think those would be my two learnings. And I think my other one is, if I think about like the kids I work with, they're some of the most resilient people, or I did work with really, really resilient people who, you know, and this was a big motivation for me in starting the business, who would, you know, be in environments. There's a big concept within neurodiversity called person-environment fit. And what that is there's nothing inherently wrong with the person. The environment is just not a good fit for them. And I think that's a big aspect of like workplaces nowadays, making sure the environment is accessible to as many people as possible. But they're in environments sometimes in schools that don't necessarily meet their needs, and they still work through that and keep going. And that resilience, I think, entrepreneurship or not entrepreneurship, is something that everyone should learn from.
And I guess that links with EUDA.org, right?
Yeah, like that was basically the founder story. Like I don't really like to like lean into cliches too much, because I think like we're, you know what, like nearly 2 years in, I guess, but 2.5 with the kind of deciding will I do it, will I won't do it. But a big motivation for me starting the business was like, I'm in my late 30s now. A lot of the kids I worked with had got to adulthood, and you know, was still in touch with them and their families, and we're struggling to access the workplace, or we're underemployed. And I think that was initially the focus of the business. That was where we started. That's not where we are now, because I think that's a really important aspect of entrepreneurship. It's not like this thing of like, I want to do this. It's like, I want to solve problems. This is a problem I see. But then sometimes when you dig into problems, you realize they're part of bigger problems, and it's just one aspect, and you can't solve this problem with solving all the other problems. So I do think, that was the initial starting point. Obviously, it's a broader diversity, equity, and inclusion product now, but that's still like a core goal for me. Like I think our biggest goal is to make the workplace kind of accessible for all, and people not be like accessing the workplace is not underemployment. It's everyone feeling fulfilled.
All right, because let me get this straight. I'm gonna try to summarize. So
Okay.
EUDA.org is like a CRM, right? That research, analyze, and identifies the KPIs towards diversity, equity, and inclusion goals.
Yes.
More or less, right? I did
Yes.
my homework and I haven't used ChatGPT.
Well done. You're a new marketing person.
Nice. So, like, how does it work? How the interface look like? The CRM interface.
Yeah. So, what our product? So, I suppose what we did last year is like, we obviously built kind of a beta product, but what we spent a lot of time doing last year was just talking to people. So, talking to DEI. So just so I don't have to say the 3 words, DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So in the past, that would be generally covered by like a HR or the people team, and the HR person might have 1 day a week to work on DEI. that has evolved over the last year to now a lot of, particularly the bigger organizations, having full teams, or at least having one person that it's their sole responsibility. They're not doing anything else. So that's been a big shift in the workplace in the last few years. So I guess what's interesting about that shift is when there's a new department in an organization, that department needs software like every other department. But what DEI teams are doing at the moment is really living in everyone else's software and trying to pull that together in very manual ways. So let's say I need a report for leadership. I need to go into the HR's team, the recruitment team, the comms team, the payment team. I need to pull all that, lots of different Excels, and then I need to try and make sense of all these Excel files I have. So I love data. Like I came from a background of doing, big data analysis, and I enjoy that, but I recognize it's not for everyone. And also it's just, there's no other department that is spending a big portion of their year trying to manually put things together. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I guess, like, while I told you where we started, when I heard that, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And there is other products out in the market, which is great. Like, I think it's a new space. We need lots of different types of solutions because there's not one type of business. But that for me was, I felt, the most urgent problem to fix.
And because I kind of get the idea, but it's difficult for me to picture, like, what KPIs do you collect specifically to facilitate this equity and
Yeah, so
inclusion?
basically we pull in all the data to one place, and they have, like, any other product, a dashboard where they can see the different data points. They can also filter that data. They can also, set specific targets and prioritize and customize their own dashboard. But I suppose what it does is it links to goals. So let's say, for example, I'm just going to pick a random example here, but you want to improve your onboarding experience, because there's some really interesting research showing that if you onboard people well, they're more likely to stay in the business. And a lot of businesses don't really invest in onboarding. They might invest in hiring, or they might invest in, like, culture and retention, but that middle part is really crucial. So let's say that you have, like, a high churn rate. You have people leaving pretty quickly. One of the things you will need to investigate is your onboarding process. Like, how is that going? So the data can pick up basically where your strengths are and where your areas for growth are, and then based on those, it identifies and chooses goals for you. I think that's the simplest way to explain it, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
I've been checking the website, and you had, like, some workshops. Like, I'm interested in that, the activities that you have done to foster the target customer that you have, how you approach them. So if you
Yeah.
can tell me a little bit about this.
Yeah, so I suppose we're basically kind of in the new product offering space. And when you're offering something new to the market, there's always going to be an element of education on the sector for people who aren't working in the sector. So, whether it's engaging with senior leadership about why this is important, what is the return on investment. Of course, we believe that it's just something organizations should do, but realistically, you have to also explain how will that impact things like profit, culture, so that everyone can get on board, because it is really important that you do have that senior leadership buy-in. So a lot of what we wanted to do at the start was learn and educate. So how we learned was we spoke to a lot of different DEI professionals. So from some of the biggest companies in the world to, like, small companies, to education, to nonprofits. And we asked them all the same questions, basically. So, like, what are the problems? How are you solving them currently? What would your dream solution look like? All the standard discovery questions to do that product market fit. So there was that learning side. And then the education side was running kind of free events. And the goal of that, I suppose, was to, I think, talk about the things we were interested in as well. We've been really lucky being an Irish headquartered business to get some grants from the government to do research projects with
Mhm.
universities in Ireland. So we did one with the university. Well, it's a department, a research hub in a university that focuses on like the future of work and learning and development. So that was great because we were able to really dive into like what is effective learning and development for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, as someone who's published research in the past, one of my pet peeves is people doing research and then not disseminating that information because
Mhm.
there's no point, scientists. I feel like psychology is a science. Not everyone would agree with me, but whatever it might be, collecting and engaging with these research studies and then not sharing the results of your research. So I think a lot of what we've been doing is sharing research, whether it be our own research or research that's out there, because I think it's really important to take that like evidence-based approach to what you're doing.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that word is really beautiful to summarize a little bit what you have been doing, sharing, because at the beginning you have to like educate like your target niche with the new product a little bit, so to say, and talk to people a lot. I also say that that's really important. That's why you and I, we are talking right now, and then share what you get. At the end, we complement each other with our skills, our information, and I think that's entrepreneurship somehow. And here's the question: what's entrepreneurship for you, then, Nessa?
That's like really interesting because I think we've had a conversation about this. For me, I believe that so I guess when I started this business, I hadn't really thought about this whole thing of being an entrepreneur. I never, and it's not something I really go around saying like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. It's not something I feel like I overtly identify with. I feel like I'm on a project basically. It feels like a project to me,
Hmm.
like an intense, time-consuming project. And I think the reason I probably disassociate from it is I feel like a lot of, particularly with social media nowadays, a lot of entrepreneurship has become, um, I don't know, like overtly glamorized, and I think is very disconnected from the day-to-day reality of building a successful business. So I think that's where we were chatting a few weeks ago. Is that, and I've listened to other people who are much more successful and further on than me. And one of the common threads they always say is people underestimate how lonely it is to be a successful entrepreneur. I think the successful part is the interesting part there. And like how much work is involved. I don't think I knew going into it how much um, kind of resilience and strength you would need to work such long hours to get back up again after a rejection or a bad day. So I think that's one part that like if I'd known what I was getting into, I probably would have taken like a 1 month holiday before I would have started. But so I think that's the thing that I think I think it's great. I think we need people going out trying to solve the problems of the world, but I think it's very important that we don't portray it as something that it's not, because the reality is, of course, it's something that's amazing, but it's also something that's really challenging. And if you just focus through social media on like the amazing parts of it, it means people can't be vulnerable and talk about the challenging parts of trying to scale and grow a business.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that word as well, vulnerability. That's one of the reasons I started a podcast, because I am not a podcast professional, but I wanted to challenge myself and do this exercise to be vulnerable a little bit and talk to people, put my ego aside. And coming back to the entrepreneurship, I think you mentioned something really important, is that like the term entrepreneurship is getting like fancy. Everyone wants to be entrepreneur. Like caricaturist side. Did I say it properly? Caricature side.
Is that?
Like a caricature, like
Oh,
satiric.
oh, caricature. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So I think but not only happens with entrepreneurship. I think it also happens, maybe at least in Spain, a little bit with politicians. They are supposed to be very good leaders, right? But just some of them are, not all of them, I would say. So it's a little bit the same, and that has passed towards the bureaucratics, towards the government. There is a lot of help from the government for entrepreneurs, and really big amounts of money invested in entrepreneurs to create like big entrepreneurial ecosystems, which I think is good in the
Yeah, I
right.
feel very strongly that that's so important to make, and it comes back to the E and DEI equity. Entrepreneurship needs to be accessible to everyone. If it's only accessible to people with a lot of money, then you're not going to have diverse businesses solving diverse problems.
Yeah, but I think that it could be dangerous to over encourage entrepreneurs that have bad ideas. For example, we need to have the feet in the ground, and we need to be realistic. And it's good to educate and help and support, but not over support the bad ideas, because then you foster mediocrity.
Yeah, see, I don't agree with you, if I'm honest.
Okay.
I think, first of all, as someone who has gone through that ecosystem in Ireland and done an accelerator,
Mm-hmm.
the competition is so high. The standard is so high that I don't know if I saw a lot of bad ideas even getting to the point that you're getting support. And the applications you go through, like week-long applications of like answering questions from 100 different angles, and I assume Spain is the same. I don't think it's something where, I think, to be honest, you can have the best idea in the world, and there's so many other elements at play than having a great idea with product market fit. That's not necessarily going to mean you succeed, because like I think at startup stage 1 in 10 succeed. So I remember when I was doing the accelerator last year, there was 13 of us, and we would always talk about probably only one, max two of us will
Mm-hmm.
still be going in a few years' time, and who knows which one of us it will be. Like, it's so hard to predict because luck is an element, like funding, cash flow. There's so many elements at play, like the market, like getting investment, all these different things that are you just keep pushing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the things that has been great for me through this process is the humility it brings, of like you're constantly having your ideas torn apart by people and stuff like that, that you get this humility of knowing that, wow, like if you get to the other side, like that's fair play. That's not easy, because I know lots of amazing businesses that have failed for reasons sometimes out of their control.
Yeah, you actually covered my next question, that was about your experience in the startup ecosystem. I think that way is a right way to support entrepreneurs. My I think we actually don't disagree, because what I criticize is to over support, not to support, and to ground people. I mean, if you are testing all the time the ideas of your fellow entrepreneur, that's all right, because you are being realistic. You are helping each other. But sometimes it could be dangerous, because it's getting trending, the term entrepreneur. It could be dangerous to support ideas that are not well grounded or not well structured. So I think we need to be realistic and do this exercise, and I think it's a responsibility for all entrepreneurs. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good experience that you had in the Irish ecosystem. In my experience in Sweden, for example, we had a good program that supported us during the idea creation. It's called Science Park. We networked a lot. So I think it's good, but we need to be aware that there are a lot of details that we need to take into account, and a lot of responsibility if you want to become an entrepreneur, not just for the picture on Instagram. So, but yeah, I agree with you. And I had a question before, but we just kept talking, and it was about the playing,
Sorry.
the playing thing, that we need to keep playing. And I think that's crucial for entrepreneurship. Stay a little bit children, right? Like play as a kid.
Yeah.
be curious. So do you have any mechanism to, when you realize, okay, I'm too boring today, I need to do something to just awake my creativity? Do you have any mechanism?
That's a really good question. I before I started the business, I did go back and I did a master's in applied positive psychology and coaching psychology. And positive psychology basically is like the scientific study of well-being. And I remember one of the other students did research around this of like how can you like build processes around play for adults. I think for me, laughing is
Mhm.
like is good. Like being able to laugh at myself as well. Like I think not in like haha I'm funny. It's more like haha I'm ridiculous. And just yeah, like trying to be joyful. I think wonder is probably what I try and like. I don't really have like a writing practice or like I'm not like practicing painting a few hours a day. I'm not that disciplined with it, but I think one thing I try and do every day is feel some wonder for wherever in the world I am, whether it's sitting at home or somewhere else, like what feeling to talk to. So I wonder, and then I curiosity is something that I am quite disciplined about because I think curiosity is so important that as we get older we stay curious. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think um, they're more like at like a personality level than at like a ritual level.
Mhm. I want to stick with the keyword laughing. There are studies that says even though you are not really laughing, if you do the gesture, you like segregate similar like hormones, right? And then you get happier. You wanna laugh a little bit?
Sure.
Ah,
Have you
yeah.
ever tried laughing yoga?
No, I heard about it, but I never tried.
Yeah. I tried it in India when I was there. It was really cool.
Nice. I have to do so. I will try to find.
Actually,
Is there?
Joanne, I should
Yes.
mention we met in the Pyrenees in a co-living, co-working. We were both there for 2 weeks.
Uh-huh.
Another thing another way I try and be playful is through travel and then through food. So
Mhm.
you were able to introduce me to rabbit paella, which I hadn't had before. So that's an example.
And you introduced me to the Irish stew, so
Yes.
it's a good exchange. I really enjoy that. I really enjoy that. So I just came up with a question that from now on I will ask to all guests.
Ooh.
Why did you agreed to have this conversation with me?
Ah. Because I think it comes back to curiosity. When you said it, I
Mhm.
was like, why not? I generally don't say no to much. I'm curious of like, what will that be like? Why not? Let's give it a try. I'm willing to fail. I'm willing to try new things. So generally, if an opportunity is presented to me, then I'm like, yeah, why not? And then also, we met in the Pyrenees. Thought you're an interesting guy and like chatting to you. So I was like, why not spend an hour chatting to Joanne?
Thank you for those kind words. I'm so happy to have had you here, and I think that's also an entrepreneurial feature, right? The curiosity, the be able to fail, right? It's okay to fail. That's something that all entrepreneurs need to keep in mind as well. It has been difficult for me to accept. I had like many projects, and none of them have become the next Amazon or whatever. But here I am doing a
Yeah.
podcast. I mean, that's something, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, that's good. Like I don't think the goal of things. Of course, success is nice, and we want our like efforts validated, and then I think one of the things that people don't talk about enough in entrepreneurship is like things like having a living wage and how it can take some time to get to that point and stuff like that. So yeah, like I don't think the pursuit of solving a problem is always noble, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have actually a comment in the chat. Greetings to Dromedary. He says that he likes the conversation. So to close this conversation, I also ask one question to all the guests. You are the second. That wraps up a little bit all what we have taught. And it
Okay.
is, why do you do what you do?
Do you have an hour?
Sorry, to have what?
I said, do you have an hour? It might take an hour to answer
Oh,
that question. I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm
let me
joking.
check
Sorry.
my schedule.
I'm joking. Why do I do what I do? I think curiosity is a big component of it. Being
Come on,
curious.
all the time curiosity, Nessa.
I know, but I don't think I can overemphasize that word enough. I think it's one of the big problems is the world is like a lack of curiosity. But that's a hypothesis I won't get into now. And there's actually research to back it up at organizational and broader levels. But I think I do it because I like the problem we're trying to solve.
That's the keyword.
I like the problem we're trying to solve. I like the people that I get to work with, whether that be within the company or the users. Like DI professionals are the nicest people. Like it's not a job you get into because you want to make loads of money and you want to I don't know. It's just you do it for the right reasons. So I get to meet lovely people who really care about making the world better and their workplace better. So I like being around good people. Like I think it's a good thing. I like it because what else do I do it? I like to be challenged. I always liked maths as a kid. And my dad always says I used to spend hours, like I would ask my maths teacher for like really hard maths questions. And then I would sit at the weekend, I was such a nerd, and I would spend hours trying to solve these really hard math problems. So I think I really like complex challenges. Like I get bored if things are not a challenge. So yeah, I think that too.
All right. So I think that was a really nice wrap up. We stick with this keyword. I think it's a good keyword to close
My new
this
name.
session. Curiosity, curiosity. Stay curious. Keep talking to people. Take care of your people. I think people. I also closed the last conversation saying that it's pretty much all about people, right? The people you surround, the people you complement, the people that complement you. So I think that's why also we had this conversation. And let's see what the butterfly effect gives to this conversation. Thank you very much, Nessa.
Thank you very much.
It was
Lovely to talk to you.
I laugh a lot, so I think I'm gonna be super happy the rest of the day. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, next week we will have other guests. I will announce it soon enough. Stay tuned. Again, thank you very much, Nessa, and see you soon.
See you soon. Bye.